Welcome to Candid Conversations with Dr. Mayfield. This episode is sponsored by Mayfield Counseling Centers, helping you find clarity, hope, and purpose. Call us at 719-452-4803. Here's your host, Trever Shirin.
And we're back. Thank you for joining us again on Candid Conversations with Dr. Mayfield. I am joined, as always, by the great Dr. Mark Mayfield, founder and CEO of Mayfield Counseling Centers. How are you today?
I'm good.
Good.
Yeah, if people are watching on YouTube, they realize that we've filmed 2 in a row because I'm still dressed with the ball cap on. But those that are just listening, have no idea.
Which does bring up the excellent point that we have started a YouTube channel for this podcast. Thank you for watching. And thank you to those of you who have been listening for a long time and have reached out to us and let us know how meaningful this podcast has been for you. That's really encouraging for Dr. Mayfield and I, and really helps us to push forward and to go further with this conversation. Right.
And one of the things that we heard from our listeners last year is that they'd like us to go deeper, and so I think we haven't decided quite yet, but every couple episodes we might take an episode from last year and go dig a little deeper into content and applicability of tools and that kind of stuff.
So give us a shout out. You can email us at candid@mayfieldcounseling.com. You can also comment on our SoundCloud feed or on YouTube. Let us know what episodes from our first season or the first half of our second season that you would like us to revisit and dive a little deeper into. We keep these episodes a little bit short just because we want to honor your time, and we don't want I don't want to listen to myself gab for an hour.
Nope.
So we want this to be a podcast that you can listen to in the car on your commute. And so we've intentionally done that. And with that comes some brevity to the topics that we discuss. And we don't want to miss out on that. So we'll be discovering the way that we can dig deeper and do several parts of a discussion and pull back the layers one at a time through the episodes.
Mm-hmm. Sounds good. And I think, if we don't hear back from anybody, we'll just figure out which ones we like the best, and we'll go deeper too.
Today we're talking about meditation. And I think that, like a lot of things that we've talked about on this show, meditation has a lot of connotations that may or may not be accurate. Sure. So let's start with an understanding of what is meditation.
I think the easiest way to look at it is this idea that even just sitting in silence, taking time away from the busyness, just to be, is meditation. It's not this complicated mess that we make it sometimes, and it's not this mystical thing that we make it sometimes too. I think every religion has a form of meditation, right? I think a lot of us, and maybe our listeners too, and I know until I got into this field, I thought meditation was, these monks with their legs crossed, floating
in the air,
the lotus pose, floating in the air and hum, that kind of stuff. And so if that's what our idea of meditation was, then, why would, I don't want to do that. Or I don't have time for that.
It doesn't align with my lifestyle. It doesn't align with my spirituality.
Whatever.
Whatever. Yeah.
And so, but really what meditation is this idea of renewing of the mind. Is if we want to get really down to the nitty gritty, and it's this idea of removing ourselves from stressors, from busyness, from chaos, and allowing our mind to renew. Dr. Caroline Leaf talks about this in a lot of her books, but we have a chance to be aware of our awareness, thinking and feeling. So if you can follow me for a second, every 10 seconds. So every 10 seconds we have the opportunity to come back to our awareness. What am I feeling? What am I thinking? So 6 times a minute to realign with our thought processes, our thinking, feeling, choosing, negative thoughts, toxic thoughts, positive thoughts. And for most of us, I don't know how often we are aware of our thinking or feeling in a day. And so meditation allows us to slow down, to become more aware of our somatic, our body. How are we feeling in our body? How are we feeling in our mind? How are we feeling, with our emotions? And then what do we need to do to realign that?
Well, and it's interesting because that's so opposite to the general concept of meditation that I grew up with,
Sure.
which was you don't think. And that's been played off of really well in the show Parks and Rec, where Chris Traeger invites Nick Offerman's character, Ron Swanson, to come to a meditation session with him. And Ron Swanson stands in the back as Chris Traeger is sitting on the floor, and afterwards they walk out and they're like, how was it? And Nick Offerman is like, I wasn't thinking about anything. Nothing. I just stood there. And that's the concept of like, wow, you're so great at meditation, you're incredible. And yet what I'm hearing from you is the exact opposite of taking advantage of that ability to be aware of our awareness every 10 seconds and contemplating, maybe just contemplating, period.
Well, I think there's different aspects of meditation. So one aspect of meditation is, let's remove all thought. Let's just be, right? And I think that's some of the more Eastern, Buddhist type of meditation where, and even with yoga and different things like that, right? It's pushing aside our thoughts to just be in the moment, to pay attention to our breathing and our being, our sitting, our posture, and that kind of stuff. And that's very beneficial too. It's putting those things aside. But if that's all meditation was, I'm not sure how beneficial it would be. And so one of my favorite books, it's very much of an aspiritual book called How God Changes the Brain by Andrew Newberg. And he's done this study, and he goes, he went and studied Tibetan monks, I think is or someplace in the Nepalese, India, Chinese area, and wanted to look at their brain. And there's a part of the brain called the corpus callosum, the anterior cingulate that connects the kind of the cortical limbic system to the frontal cortex. And in monks that spent a lot of their time meditating, their anterior cingulate was actually noticeably thicker on a brain scan than the average human being. Which
is a good thing or bad thing?
It's a good thing. So it helps us, that awareness piece, that emotional regulation, that understanding our bodies, that being in tune with the world around us, it's heightened, it's stronger, it's strengthened. And so he goes, I'm going to try something. So he had one of his clients or patients, I think he's a neuroscientist or a psychiatrist, or he's a doctor of some sort.
He does something
with brains. Yeah. But he goes, I'm going to have my client just do this 8-minute meditation every day for the next 8 weeks. And
okay.
Let's do a pre-brain scan and a post-brain scan to see if the anterior cingulate has strengthened. And it did. And so, his assertion is that when we focus on something other than ourselves, God, as he calls it, and that's, whatever spirituality you ascribe to, we all have names for that. But so God changes our brain, meaning meditation, meaning thinking of things outside of ourselves, whether that be, for Christians, it's scripture, prayer, meditation, those kinds of things. For others, it might be different. That it actually makes a physical effect on the brain. And what Dr. Caroline Leaf would call that is that our non-physical mind, right, the part of us that is not a cellular piece of us, is actually changing the structure of our brain.
And it's really cool that we can see this scientifically. And, I was doing just a little bit of research coming into this episode, and there's all sorts of claims around meditation.
Sure.
As there are with everything.
Yep.
And what's really interesting is that a lot of these claims have neuroscience backing or psychological backing or scientific backing at all, that shows that it increases memory, it increases emotional intelligence, it increases I think one study showed like it can possibly increase lifespan of just because you're slowing things down. And
well, think about this too, right? I mean, think about is mental illness on the rise, or is our categorization of from a scientific medical framework on the rise? And I don't think that mental health issues are on the rise or mental illness are on the rise. It's the fact that we've had, for over the last 30 or 50 years, we've had to find a way to categorize what's going on. And really what it is it's mind health. It's this idea that we, whether it be what kind of things we're entering, allowing into our bodies, whether, thoughts, food, all those kinds of things. But it's also how are we working on our thinking and our feeling, and this idea of mindfulness and meditation needs to be such a big part of our lives, because it helps remove toxic thought. It helps, focus in our mind. It helps, and it's amazing how our thoughts, affect our physiology. So think about this. Have you ever started getting a sore throat and you're like, oh crap, I'm getting sick. And now your thinking is about getting sick and you get sick. What if you started getting a sore throat and you're like, oh, okay, I got a sore throat. Not the end of the world. It's emergency. I'm going to get my vitamins, my echinacea, some sore throat tea. I'll be fine. And it lasts maybe a day or two.
I may step on some toes here, but I think that's kind of what this podcast is all about.
Right.
That's how I feel a lot with essential oils. And because my sister sells them, I have friends that sell them. Sure. My family uses them constantly, and I've used them here and there. And for me, I think that a lot of it is just the mindset that you're using.
Maybe it's a somewhat of a placebo.
Right.
I think there are definitely healing powers for essential oils, because it's been hundreds of thousands of years that these things have been used, and
Sure.
But I think in some ways too, it's the idea that I'm going to be just fine. I've got my essential oils.
I have a headache, so I'm going to use some frankincense, and that's going to fix it. And oh look, it did.
And maybe it's a percentage of the oil, and it's a percentage of it, but I think you're right. We don't realize how our thinking affects our being.
Right. Because here's the thing about the placebo effect that I think is just mind-boggling. I think it's, effective 30% of the time?
More than that, I think.
It's to the point where something the FDA can regulate has to be more than 50% useful, not just because that's a 50-50 chance that it works, but because the placebo effect is close to that. Yep. And they've done studies, like double-blind studies, on bone marrow and bone density. And they found that individuals who were taking a sugar pill and under the placebo effect had the same increase in bone density of it was something like 15% bone density increase.
Right, which goes to show that our thoughts have power.
Incredible power.
And it's this laying, and so this is where in a lot of ways this concept, and then in doing some other studies, has really changed how I look at and how I do counseling, because it's not, okay, we're going to label you with a disorder and we're going to get you on medication and good luck.
Yeah.
It's going, no, you have power. Yes, I want to hear your story. Yes, you've had horrible things happen to you. Sure. And I'm not going to take that away or diminish that or placate you with that. But let's hear your story. And now what are you going to do with it? And that's where, if we're not using mindfulness and meditation, if we're not using, there's so many apps, and we'll give you a list of apps before we're done here, but there's a lot of resources that you can use that help you take control of your mind. And studies show that when we begin to take control of our mind, our thoughts, right, then our choosing gets better, our health gets better, our mindsets get better, our mental health gets better. No, it's not this one size fits all, it's gonna, it's this magic pill that it's gonna work for everybody. It's gonna take discipline, it's gonna take effort, it's gonna take time.
And I think that's where things get weird for me, because it took me a long time to get into any form of mindfulness or meditation. And even when we started talking about EMDR, it felt the same way. There are a lot of people who will say, this is the only way, this is the one-stop solve everything, whatever. And I believe that if there was such a thing, everybody would be doing it. Like, if there was one thing we could do that would change everything in our lives and make everything perfect, everybody would be doing it. Right. That doesn't exist, but the things that we talk about with mindfulness and meditation can be vitally important and super helpful to living a healthy life. It's a component of that lifestyle that leads to healthiness.
Well, down to the point, and one of the books I'm going to push, because we've been on over the last 5 or 6 months with Dr. Caroline Leaf. She was part of our conference. She was fantastic. Is this idea of switch on your brain, is that that if we realize that the power of our thought actually has the ability to unlock epigenetic traits that will affect our physiology, or the vice versa, right? That there's so much power in that. But there was a study out of one of the Ivy League schools, I can't remember which one, that was looking at the oncology ward of a cancer unit, and doing a study on how much unforgiveness and bitterness was a part of this person's life. And I think it was like 90-something% of those on the oncology ward had unforgiveness and bitterness. Like, what does that say to the how we affect our physiology? Yeah. I mean, Trevor, I'm sure you've met people that you could have sworn they were, 70, 75 years old.
Oh, yeah.
And then you find out they're in their 40s, and you're like, what? Yeah. But it's that they've probably had a hard life, and they've probably never been told that, you have the ability to react, interact, and choose how you're going to engage what happened to you.
And we can see that on a really simple level too of I have a good friend who is currently in a transition from a job that he's been doing for 7 years or so, and has been pretty miserable for him. And now he's starting a new career in something that he really enjoys. And I saw him the other day, and I just saw this vibrance in his face. Of his eyes looked brighter. There was a twinkle in them. He just held himself in a different pose. And I think we can see it in that way too. When somebody is having a good day versus a bad day, it shows in our bodies.
Right. I'm going to step on some toes here with that, right? So even if you're in a bad job, why couldn't you have that vibrancy? And it's this idea of if we're working on the discipline of meditation and mindfulness and holding captive our thoughts, coming into awareness of our thinking and our feeling, right, every 10 seconds, we have the ability to be that vibrant in a stressful situation.
Which is a very Viktor Frankl idea of, because Viktor Frankl was in a concentration camp back in World War II, and essentially just decided, you know what, the Nazis may be able to do the X, Y, and Z.
You take my body, but
you can't take my emotions, my choice, my mind. And there's such incredible power in the choice to choose, I think. Because I think a lot of the time we choose not to choose.
The freedom to choose.
Yeah.
I think is the best way to look at it.
There you go. That's a better way.
We have the freedom. Everybody has the freedom to choose. And the most effective way to be in control of that and to not let circumstances bring you down. And we all do this, right? I'll be the first one to say that I allow stress in the circumstances of running a company or doing all these things. It gets to me, and I have to make sure that I have the power. I know I have the power to choose. So, for example, over the last couple of weeks, we've gone through some ups and downs here. And I really let the downs affect me, to the point where I was melancholic, and I didn't say much, and you could see it on my face, and the energy that I was radiating was very palpable. And I don't know what it was, whether it was on the drive home or just going, you know what, I'm making this worse. Like literally, I'm making this worse. And so I spent some time, driving through the middle of nowhere, just really being aware of my surroundings and looking at the beauty and going, I'm going to choose to be in the moment right now, which is a form of meditation, form of mindfulness. And I'm not going to allow these circumstances, because I can't control these circumstances, I'm not going to allow those to affect my present. And it was amazing, almost instantaneously. I'm like, oh, my jaw loosened, and my brow was not furrowed anymore, and I can breathe. And
for me, especially back in 10 years ago in my depression, that negative thinking felt more comfortable to me than the positive thinking. And we've talked before about neural pathways, and how if we're constantly feeding into a negative thought pattern,
toxic thought pattern,
it grows, it becomes more comfortable, it's easier. That's the automatic. And I'm still in the process of this, but my belief and my hope is that after time, it will be more comfortable to do the positive and the healthy thought patterns than the toxic ones that I'm so used to.
Well, our cells regenerate, right? I think it's every 60 days our cells regenerate. And so as if we're making a concerted effort to choose differently. So we're aware of our thinking patterns, we're aware of our feeling, and those are good things, but it doesn't lay a new neural pathway down until we choose, and we're choosing the more positive route. After 60 days, it becomes a bit easier, right? And so every 60 days, we have a chance to really lay down some really foundational neural pathways and break up the other ones, And so, I've had clients tell me with mindfulness going, I tried, doesn't work. I'm like, how long did you try? Oh, just one time. It's a discipline. And so I want our listeners to hear this is not something that is, like I said, this magic pill. It's going to take effort. It's going to take work. It's going to take time. But if you become disciplined in it, you will see the effects. And maybe you won't see the effects outright, but the people around you will see the effects, like your friend, right? You look different. Oh, do I? And you don't maybe understand that until you get into it.
Well, and the discipline too doesn't have to be climbing up Pikes Peak and sitting on the mountain for 3 hours every day and then walking down and then going to work, because like you said, the book was talking about an 8-minute meditation.
Sure. So let's talk about resources. So first of all, if you're really interested in this idea of kind of the neuroscience behind it and the why behind it, Switch on Your Brain by Dr. Caroline Leaf is a fantastic book. It breaks it down. And then it actually has a 21-day brain detox at the end, which really helps you take control of your thoughts. Yeah. But there's so many apps. Like we use the Calm app at home, and it has the background noises of like the ocean or a babbling brook or nature scenes. That's really beneficial if you just want to be in a space. But I really like Stop, Breathe, and Think, and it's an app that's free. You can add, you can pay to add different things, but it has anywhere from 2 to 10 minute guided imagery meditations, which means is you put in your headphones and it'll walk you through, okay, now take a deep breath, and here's how you take the deep breath, and here's how you exhale, and now think that you're, and it walks you through. There's some for sleeping, there's some for waking, there's some for, the daily interrupt. And that's what I'm saying is discipline doesn't have to be, like you said, walking up Pikes Peak and then spending 3 hours and coming down and going to work. It could be a 5-minute in my office. I'm becoming aware that I'm getting stressed. How do I stop that? Well, I'm going to stop that with a 2-minute meditation, and then, okay, I'm back in good spirits.
Yeah. I really like the app Headspace. There's some free uses to that as well as paid resources. And once you kind of develop that, it's pretty easy to walk yourself through something as well. It's just nice to have someone walking you through it.
Well, there's days when I'm feeling stressed, and I'll go down, lie down on my own couch, no pun intended, and and close my eyes, put a pillow on my chest, and I'll walk myself through kind of the stream guided imagery of letting some of those worries go down. And I've done it enough times that I can just do it myself.
Totally, yeah, and I think you look at some individuals who have done a lot of meditation and training on it, like Dan Siegel has his wheel. And Deepak Chopra, he has his meditation that he walks people through on Oprah's show, and they, I think they both say like it gets faster, and they also take time, and length of time changes, and they do it in different ways, and there's variety to it, and I think that's been really encouraging to me because I'm pretty inconsistent, and discipline is not my strength at all. And so to have to do something every single day that feels the same would be so boring to me. And so feeling that luxury of you can change it up. It doesn't have to be the same.
Well, and also finding a place to escape to if you can. Mm-hmm. So, we just moved into a new home about 5 months ago that has a porch off our master bedroom that overlooks the mountains. I'm still at home. There's noise outside, but if I can get a cup of coffee or a glass of wine, whatever day, depending on the time of day, right?
I was just gonna say.
At the same time, but, and sit out there and just notice, we've got wildlife, and notice the sunset or the breeze or whatever it might be. But even to the other extreme, then we have access to a lake, and I love fishing and kayaking, right? So not saying that has to happen every day, but if you have that access to things that you enjoy, going for a hike or going for a walk or sitting with a good beverage and just listening to some music, whatever that might be, it doesn't have to be scripted, but it has to be intentional.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for joining us today. I hope this was helpful to you. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Follow us on social media, Candid Conversations with Dr. Mayfield. We will catch you next week.
Thank you for joining Candid Conversations. If you would like more information, go to mayfieldcounseling.com/Candid Conversations and check out our Facebook page, Candid Conversations with Dr. Mayfield.